Welcome to Introduction to Figure Drawing. Today we're going to talk about how to take a basic stick figure shape that almost anybody can draw and build it into something a little more substantial and real that you can use any way that you want to render or draw the human figure. Whether you're a traditional artist or a digital artist, whether you want to be a drawer, make comics, painter, anything, illustrator. One of the most key aspects of being a representational artist is drawing the human figure. It's an undertaking, but it's very rewarding when you can understand it and be able to capture the grace and motion and structure of the human body on the page. It's wonderful and it's a very rewarding experience. So I thought what I would do is I would do 3 different drawings of the figure, kind of a very basic framework. We're not going to get into anatomy or drawing clothes today because those are topics all into their own. But I just wanted to start with basics here, and you can't get any more basic than gesture. Now, I drew these in pencil on a small sheet of paper, and I scanned them in, and I'm going to draw on top of them and kind of show you what I'm thinking and how you can start to think about the human figure in very simple ways. So, as you can kind of see, these are just nothing more than really just stick figures. And at this phase of drawing the figure, what you want to be thinking in the back of your head is you want to be thinking about capturing the essence of the figure in just a couple of lines. We call this gesture. Now, when we're talking about gesture, what we're trying to do is to capture the essence of the body in just a couple of simple lines. And these lines don't necessarily even have to be lines that you see on the body. You're going to be tempted to look at a figure or a body that you want to draw and kind of see all of what we call the contour of the body, the very just basic linear lines. When you go down, you go down the head and then you do the little lump for where the brow ridge is and then the cheekbones, and then you go down even more, and then there goes the neck, and then, there goes like the shoulder, and trying to draw the body in this one continuous line is very tempting. But what you end up with is something that's very flat, And then when you try to add the features on, it kind of just feels like you're kind of just like, it's like you're drawing on construction paper almost. And a lot of people can use this to do cartoons or very simple shapes. But when you're starting out a drawing of the body, what you want to be able to do is not necessarily to think like this, but rather think in terms of basic forms. Now let me get rid of this. And what I've done here is all of these poses were based on statues. I think this one is a statue of Zeus. And what I tried to do was get the basic kind of essence of the pose. Because if you look at this, you can see that this is definitely someone that's human, that's standing. They're holding like maybe a staff or a stick of some kind. And you can kind of get the sense of how the body works. So the 3 big masses we're thinking about with the human body are the head, the upper torso, which includes the rib cage, and kind of just that upper chest region, and then the hips, which are down here. And to kind of explain that, I'll just draw them down here. We have a head. The head then goes into the rib cage, and the rib cage, you don't have to like think of each and every individual rib, but rather just think of it as kind of like this weird egg shape. And then the pelvis, which is kind of the bottom mass of the hips, is just kind of the simple box, really. And these 3 masses we can rotate to try to express the human body. And kind of one of the key things to keep in mind with the relationship between the torso and the hips is how they kind of balance each other out. And you can kind of see that here with the way this pose is. So whenever you're standing for long periods of time, you don't ever stand at attention. Um, if we have perhaps a head here, and then this is the kind of the torso, and again, these are just very crude, just so you can kind of get the idea. We don't stand at attention like this, with both of with our weight equally distributed onto both legs, standing at attention, almost like a soldier. Um, because this tends to put pressure on our pelvis and our body, and it's uncomfortable. So if you're ever out and about at a park or maybe at a library, you'll notice that people tend to do this. What they'll do is they'll generally, their hips will kind of swing like this at an angle, and all of the weight of their body will sit on this one leg, while this leg kind of just can bend out because it can't go in a straight line down to the ground. It has to bend a little bit because it's longer, and the hips kind of have this angle to them. Um, and to counteract this angle, what we'll often do is have an opposite angle on the shoulders. So the shoulders will often do this. And it's really common. You see people, like you see models, will do this sort of pose, where they'll have this arm extended out long to match this long arm here, and this one will kind of be crunched up on their, holding their hand on their hip like this. And you can do a little line here to represent that twist, because the body's not standing, because the relationship of the torso and the pelvis isn't like this necessarily. It's kind of has this bend to it, you know. And if they're doing it the other way, it can be something like this, you know. And we're just really thinking in simple stick figures here because, you know, the masses of our bodies can really be simplified very easily. You know, that's why when we're kids, we can draw stick figures, and they do a pretty good job of representing the human figure. So when I was doing this drawing up here, um, what I was thinking of is that this statue that I was drawing from had a lot of its weight along this leg, and this weight was going down. And what that does is it makes it so that this leg can relax and loosen like this and kind of get this bent line here. Um, Try this if you can. Stand up and see what happens when you put weight onto only one of your legs, and you'll see that you kind of get this bend here. So the shoulders up here are going this way, and they're doing this sort of direction. And this gives the pose a balance. This person could stand like this for hours and be perfectly stable. And really just getting the relationship between the shoulders, the hips, and the head, and trying to understand them is a really key part of figure drawing. And you can get a lot of mileage out of them, you know. And the thing is, once you understand this relationship between the torso, the pelvis, and the head, the limbs you can just add on, and most of the time it makes sense. So here, like I said earlier, that it's twisting this way, so this one's higher. Whichever of these sides of the leg is higher, that one will be the one that the weight is on, because we don't really have X-ray vision where we can see how the skeleton is working. But if we look at which side of someone's pelvis is higher, you can kind of figure out where the weight is being held. So on this side, we have the straight leg. This one kind of is looser. And all of these lines are very basic. You know, I'm not trying to render a body perfectly. I'm trying to get the gist of it, you know? That's the thing about this phase. It's all about gesture, trying to get the gesture or energy or the feeling of the pose down, and you can build on it later in stages. Oftentimes, you can just take these lines, draw them lightly, and erase them. See, I'm not even trying to draw this hand here, like just a basic box to kind of make a fist, and then this one I kind of just let fall by the wayside. A good habit to be in is to use only 3 types of lines. This is kind of a good habit to fall in. whenever you are just drawing in general, and that's to use three types of curves, three types of lines. Those are C, S, and I. That's C curves, S curves, and straights. C curves being these kind of long flowing curves like this. You can use these. They don't have to be this long. They can be more shallow. They can go either way. And using these types of flowing rhythmic curves will get you a lot of. Um, it'll get you a good kind of motion. And then S curves are similar. It's basically just two C curves that are on top of each other. Or basically, it's kind of this motion. You don't see that much. You don't see it a whole lot in drawing the figure. It's more kind of drawing quick changes, but it's a useful tool to have in your tool belt. And then lastly, the most important is just the straight line. When you want to show structure or solidity, a straight line will do that very well. So when I'm drawing this leg here, I'm not worried about the individual musculatures or the contours or the lines that I see. I'm just worried about that basic line to get that weight down and show that this leg is holding the weight. Same here, he's holding a staff. Let me draw that line a little straighter. And this staff that he's holding is also a straight line to kind of show that solidity. But these, you kind of have an implied curve here. I'm maybe not even drawing this curve directly, but it's implied because we have two straight lines like this. I've kind of explained everything going on with this pose. Basically, with these three poses, I wanted to show kind of three different problems you may run into, the three most common poses we see. This one is a sitting pose. It's based on the Thinker, probably one of the most famous statues of all time. And here we see a little less shifting of the pose because this person's sitting. So the hips here are pretty straight because he's sitting here on this pillar. It's just straight up and down. So his hips are directly on that. And up here we just have his shoulders. He's kind of brooding. And the kind of direction of the torso, or rather the shoulders to the pelvis, we kind of get this upper curve like this. He's leaning over, like when you're thinking, you know. You know, your back kind of bends a little bit and you sit forward, you slump. You know, this guy, if he's sitting like this for a long time, he's probably going to have some really bad posture. But that kind of energy is good to keep in mind. And I maybe even drew this a little too straight up and down. He's probably sitting further over. So whenever I work on top of this, I want to keep that in mind. The thing about drawing is that you're always thinking about what to do next, what to change. Specifically in the gesture phase, it's always better to think in extremes. You know, if you're drawing someone walking, you know, you want to be able to draw them walking in extremes. You know, they're really strutting that foot forward, and this one's really kind of hanging back, and then this one is going back like this, and this one they're going forward. And you really want to start in extremes like this because it's very easy to take this extreme, kind of more pushed pose and go back on top of it and maybe say, oh, okay, maybe that leg isn't sticking out that far. At this phase, we're not worried about proportion. We're not worried about how big things are. We're just worried about kind of getting some lines down and kind of making that paper a little messy and making a mess. And the beauty of drawing is that, especially drawing in pencils, that we can clean up our messes. It's really just about making messes, cleaning them up, and just kind of slowly refining over time. So with this pose, we kind of have this hunched figure, and the shoulders are up here. And I guess we can start with the legs. So the relationship between these, the shoulders and the hips, isn't that strong. We have just kind of a slight bend like this. Actually, let me erase and kind of clarify that line a bit more. You're never going to get any drawing in your first try. You always have to work on top of it and try to refine and work over time. It's a matter of persistence and patience. So one leg comes out of the hip like this and goes down. The other leg is kind of more at the side, and it does this. And I'm trying to get that curve in there and then just a little curve right here to kind of indicate the feet. Um, it's almost like a pictogram. It's a map that we can build on later. And then we have the arm from up top up here, and it's resting on this knee, and then the hand is going down. So that we think of as a curve, a C curve that's going down. Um, the musculature in the arm doesn't necessarily do that, but it feels like a curve. There's that curve going in. And then we have the other arm back here. I guess that's this person's their right arm is leaning on their leg like this, and then it's going up. And their hand is on their cheek. So that's the thing. This is a gesture drawing. It's messy, it's basic, but you're getting something down that you're going to build on. And real quick, let's finish up with this pose here, which is a walking pose. I always start with the head because it gives me something to base it on. And from the head, you can build out. Also, the head tells you how big the rest of the body is going to be. So this one, we're kind of looking at a side angle. If this was like a sheet of paper, it'll look kind of like this, with lines going back like this. And let's start with those shoulders. Usually whenever a certain arm is raised slightly, we think of that arm being a little higher. So starting up here, going down here, let's do a line through there. That doesn't feel quite right to me, actually. I'm going to go back on top of that, and I'm going to do this to kind of show that that this arm is further back in space. I'm probably thinking ahead. I should just be focusing on this pose and kind of trying to get this energy right. So this line here connects to the hips, and then from the hips we get this leg. And that doesn't even feel right to me, I would actually say. What actually I should do is probably something like this, because when we're walking forward, our legs curve down like this, just this kind of long, swooping C-curve line. And then there's a foot. And then back here, we have these kind of two C-curves that represent both the upper leg and the lower leg kind of bending back. And then if this leg is outstretched, then the opposite side's arm will be stretched like this, because that gives us balance. If you ever see someone walking, you'll notice they never have one arm out like this and then one leg out like that, like this. It's not an efficient way to walk, and it doesn't give you nearly the amount of balance that we need to stand up. The human body is just this brilliant machine, and it's full of these ways that it counteracts each other and is constantly in balance. So this shoulder from the shoulder to the arm will go back like this, and we're getting down the basic information of the pose. It's not pretty, but it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to kind of give us the overall mood and gesture of the pose. So that's kind of my phase one of my drawing. I kind of think in three phases when I'm drawing the figure. And the first one is this gestural phase where I'm trying to get stuff down. The next phase I think about is what I call the kind of the measuring phase. I'm basically taking the mess from this phase, the energy, and I'm trying to refine it into something a little easier to read. So I'm kind of thinking more analytically. So let's start with our standing statue figure over here. Now, the human body, we can measure by using the head, the length of the head, as a measuring stick. So if my head is about this tall, I can measure another 3 down, and we found the halfway point for the body. And then if we go down, take those 4 and add another 4, we have 8 heads. And that's how tall the human body is. It's this proportional system that kind of gives us an average. And again, it is an average. You can everyone's a little different. That's what makes us human. And it's about kind of keeping these proportions in the back of your head and exaggerating them or reining them in and just being aware of them. Sometimes you can draw someone that's maybe like 9 heads tall, and that'll give you kind of a more statuesque, taller look. A lot of fashion illustration is kind of known for doing this. And sometimes with cartoon characters, what they'll do is they'll take the head measurement and actually make the heads bigger, which makes in turn their body smaller. So cartoon characters are often a little shorter, like this. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and measure the limbs and make sure they're in proportion. From, like I said, from half the body down, you get the rest of the full length of the leg. The leg starts a little higher up here, but we don't need to worry about that right now. The halfway point is basically the bottom of the knee. A lot of people use a simple oval or just kind of a basic box to represent the knee. Just remember that the bottom of that box goes on this little mark here, where it's 2 heads up or 6 heads down. And the length of the arms, generally the top arm is about roughly 2 heads in length. 1, 2. And then the forearm is whatever this is, but a little less. Is there an exact measurement? Yes, but don't worry about it. Just make this one a little shorter. So this one's X long, just make this one a little less than that. And then the length of the hand, a little less than that. So if I have a hand that's fully extended, it's going to be about this long. And if it's making a fist, it's going to be about that long. These are things you just come to observe over time. Because you can learn a lot of this stuff from books or tutorials, but a lot of the best lessons you learn about drawing and trying to represent the world, you get just from your daily life and learning these things on your own. I think a lot of people can help kind of put you in the right direction, but these are observations you need to make for yourself at some point. And then the other arm, this one's about 2 down, and then just a little less going up. And on top of it, you'll notice I kind of have these shapes here that I've put on. This is kind of a way to think about the human body abstracted. This abstraction we can take and kind of put onto our gestural form that we were working with earlier, and it gives us a little more refined shapes. As you can see from earlier, my hips were a little too high, and I lowered them by using my measuring method. And when we find that measurement, what I like to do is do this kind of triangle shape. And it's not a straight triangle. It's kind of curved, and it curves the human body. And it's this flowing rhythm. We have this kind of straight line up here, and then we have this, and it goes down, and then we have this line, and it goes down, and they meet. If we were looking at a human from front, these lines would be straight. But if we're looking at them from the side, they kind of do this curving motion. If they're looking the other way, it does this. Because if you look at the body from a side view, it's not perfectly straight. There are these kind of flowing curves that happen throughout the body. It's like a river almost. And they all add up to a balanced form that can stand on its own 2 feet. But these lines kind of happen throughout the body. So my line of going from up here to down here kind of has this downward angle. And these are just things to think about, but these rhythm lines give you a good feel for kind of the nature of the body. Again, we're kind of thinking more in abstract terms rather than concrete. I need to draw an arm that looks like this, or I need to draw these individual hairs on the head. We're thinking in big shapes, because drawing is really just a matter of working big to small. I'm going to write that up here. And then what I can do next is or what I should do first, is kind of do just a nice basic oval for the head, and then a little kind of these 2 lines that for the neck, because the neck itself is just kind of this shape that leads into the torso, and it just attaches. Um, Whenever I'm drawing the head from a side angle, I tend to do kind of a sailboat shape, because it's really easy to just stick a good ear on there, and then an eye, and another eye, and a nose. Um, but when I'm thinking from a front angle, I tend to do more of an oval shape, because that you can kind of build on and then add eyes, nose, cheekbones, etc. Um, and those are the shapes I tend to use, but you can really use anything, just anything that represents these forms. Um, and then once we have where our neck is, from the edges of the neck, we take this line and go to the widest point of the hips, like this. And we kind of make this girdle shape. It's basically a triangle on top of another triangle, with just this one a little wider because you have to fit the neck in there. And this gives us a nice framework for the mass of the body and the mass of the torso. And from there, what we can do is add on the limbs like we were doing before. From this, we can go down and kind of find the legs, this one being a straight line still. And I'm still trying to stick to C curves, S curves, and straight lines as I'm doing this to kind of keep that energy. And another thing I like to do is go ahead and kind of get a feel for how the rib cage sits, because even though our body kind of has this top-heavy triangle shape, you see like superheroes who have that and like their abs and stuff. It's this kind of trapezoid triangle shape. Underneath all of that, if we have the neck up here, is the rib cage, which is this egg form, and it gives the body this kind of round overall shape. The rib cage kind of opens up down here, and you have the individual ribs. If you've ever seen like a skeleton on Halloween, you should kind of know what I'm talking about. These ribs come out like this, and the head comes out of there. But kind of getting that egg in there is very helpful for getting a feel for the roundness of the human body and being able to kind of put that on your drawings. So I'm just going to take my pen here and just go around and kind of get a feel for that rib cage. The rib cage basically starts up here at this kind of second head mark and goes all the way down here to this line down here. This is the line where the nipples are of the human, or where the bottom of kind of the chest muscles are. And then this is where the belly button is. And then here is the bottom of the pelvis. Then from there, the rest of the legs. So I'm going to go and move on to this one here. This is my thinker pose. I'm more concerned with getting the kind of the shape of this torso correct than the arms. We can always add in the arms later. But like I did before, this one I'm going to kind of do more of the sailboat shape because I'm seeing the side of the head more. And then the neck goes into the torso like this. And then I just make this straight line across and then try to connect it down to the bottom and do these lines. And then, again, from the neck, the sides of the neck, that is, go down to the pelvis. And then kind of get this line down here. And then if I add in my little egg of the rib cage, this is going to be, these are going to be lines we're going to see on the actual human body. And then from here, I kind of think about more of the rhythms of these legs and kind of try to get them more correct. I'm also measuring too. I'm looking, okay, so that head is about this long, and then from there we get the line, and then here we get the line of the belly button, and here the bottom of the pelvis. And then you can also take that head length and kind of turn it on its side, like so, and take this measurement. I think that's actually about right. And just make sure these legs are about the right length. So that one's about 2. This one is about 2. Add a little for the feet. These don't have to be precise. It's always better, if you're going to fudge the measurements, it's always better to add a little than take a little off. And if you're going to add a little, add them at the legs. because it usually it looks a little better. If we have a body here and the legs are maybe just a little bit longer like this, that doesn't look too weird, and doesn't look super off. But maybe having a head, and then these shorter legs, it looks like a child. It looks like someone who's on the shorter side, and that may not be what you're going for. So I'm going to measure this other leg. It's sticking out a little more, and I'm kind of just thinking behind it. I can't see it on the page here, but I'm thinking behind it. So the leg's about this long. The head length is about that much, and it goes back into here onto the other side of that pelvis. And I'm just kind of thinking, okay, so that one's about that long, and then the foot. Okay, this is working. This is about right. Let me compare it with my original one. And yeah, that looks good. And also, you'll see I get rid of this layer. This torso here is a little wider, but I was trying to get more of a structural shape, so you could tell that this person was sitting. But going on top of it with these lines gives it a little more of a human feeling. It looks a little more right. And also the body seems like it's in more proportion. It's not like I have this giant battleship chest. And then, again, I kind of have this form here, this little block that this person's sitting on, and he's thinking. And then you have the arms as well, which I'm just going to kind of gesture in a C curve here. Not that high. Just going down here. It can go from the top down to here. Well, it's a grayscale drawing. It's kind of gray. So that hand is going to end up about right there, and then this one is going to go down, and then hold the face up like that because he's thinking. Having another color pen or maybe another color, like a colored pencil on hand is always handy. And then lastly, I'm going to do this one. I'm probably not going to spend as much time on it because we've got to get finished here. So again, I'm going to use that triangle shape. This person is walking this way, but this person's walking this way, but their head's looking this way, so you kind of get this twist effect. And I'm going to take kind of my triangles, and I'm going to add them onto the body. This is the bottom of the pelvis, and as you can see, I'm also adding some measurements on top. Bottom of the belly button, bottom of the pelvis. Going down and doing my triangles. And then a straight line, just a nice, strong, straight line. The neck ends about right there. The side of the neck curves down like this. And then we kind of wrap it like a Christmas present and get this girdle shape. And then I can also take that and on top of it, just add that rib cage and kind of get the feel for it. The rib cage I also like to add in because from this side of the triangle going out, we get the limbs, and you want to make sure the shoulders are wide enough to account for the arms, because if you don't, what you'll end up with is kind of you're trying to fit in your arms here, but also get the rib cage in there, and then the head is up there, and just kind of looks weird. And then, like I said, I'm just kind of gesture these in. Sometimes I'll add another line just to kind of get the feeling of the form, or the shape rather. I'm kind of thinking flat still, So this one I may think of as kind of like this, because this person's walking, so maybe just a line like this, and then that goes down into a foot, and then this leg comes down and then wraps back. Maybe this person's mid-stride. And again, just basic curves. Just whoop, whoop. You want to think in these big flowing lines at this point. The time for smaller, detailed, more intricate lines is later on, once we kind of know the basic forms and the general shapes of whatever we're drawing are. So let's move on to the kind of last stage we're going to talk about, and that is form. I did a workshop a while ago about form, and the kind of Cliff Notes version I can give is that shapes are flat. Shapes are like squares, or triangles, or circles, ovals, I guess. Can't draw a perfect circle. And forms are three-dimensional. Forms um, have height and width and depth. We also talked about this in the perspective lecture from a while ago. Um, if you want to understand more about kind of the height, width, and depth, it has these three axes. It is tall. It's like a box, you know. It's tall, it's wide, and it's deep. Um, deep. Rather than a flat shape like a square here, which is only has height and width. It's like a sheet of paper or something that's very thin and in front of you. Um, and the human body itself is, rather than being a shape, is actually a form. It's round and it has mass to it. So there comes a phase in every drawing where we need to account for this mass, this form. Um, And the best way to consider this form on the human body is to treat it as these basic objects. So you'll see here, I've treated this upper arm just kind of like a tube, you know, like a really long can of soup. Um, if I imagine there's a rubber band around it or like a label on this can of soup, it doesn't go across like this. It wraps around it. And if the tube or the like the pipe, the tube, the soup can that's coming, if this is the bottom of it and that's facing towards me, the label or the rubber band around it is going to curve like this. It's going to curve around the form like that. Now, let's say it's coming from the other direction. Maybe if that's the bottom, let's say maybe I'm looking at the top. It's going to kind of curve up like this. What I recommend you do is get like a can of soup or anything, or maybe like a medicine bottle or even just a bottle of Coke or a can of Coke and look down and see how the lines that may appear to be straight when you look at it at just like a flat angle head on curve like this or like this when you hold it at different angles. And we're taking that principle and kind of conceiving of it on the human body. So this upper arm of the torso, we're seeing the bottom of it. So it's kind of coming at us. And that's the opposite of this leg down here, where what didn't really make it clear, but we're seeing the lines that go like this, and this you can think of as going away from us. And that's why we're thinking in terms of form, because it shows direction very easily. And adding these little lines here, we call them cross contours because they go across. And they are contours, which is just a fancy word for line. So we're just kind of thinking in terms of like soup cans. So these up here are pretty much just these basic forms, these kind of basic tubes. These are a little different, where these maybe bend a little more and they have a more complex shape. And that's just because I know what the legs look like. If you look at a human leg, you can kind of see these shapes and you can modify them. You can maybe have a tube or even like a Coke bottle is a really good example. You kind of start with a basic shape like this, and we can kind of add on to it. And then there's all these curves that go inside of it. But it's still round, So I've taken the limbs and thought of them as cylinders, and I've taken the torso and I've thought of it more or less like just a really big cereal box. And that's so I can kind of see the direction of it. So if I'm seeing the box from this angle, if we're looking down on it from the top, it's kind of like this. And it's facing out this way. And if we're looking at it from this angle, that's me, it's kind of, I'm seeing a little bit of this side and I'm seeing a lot of this side. So that's why it's shaped like this. And I'm thinking of it, again, as a three-dimensional form that has length, width, and depth. The same I've done for the pelvis, which is where the hips lie. I think it makes a better box. What some people will do for the torso is kind of take that egg shape of the rib cage we were talking about and kind of like a ball, just wrap a line around it. But that can be a little complicated at times. And the thing about spheres is it's hard to tell what direction they're going. But with a box, you know really quickly kind of what the shape is and what it's representing. So the neck is kind of coming out of the top of this box like this. If I had X-ray vision, I would see the other side of the box. There'd be a little hole up here where the neck is going into. And then we have the head, which I think of as this kind of modified cylinder shape, where it has the top plane. And if you think about the bottom, if we look at it from the bottom, and the neck comes out of there. So it's a kind of cylinder that's kind of lopsided. So that's flat and that's flat, but this here is round. So this is what I call the form section. Where we're thinking about the body in terms of these three dimensions and we're adding on to it. So over here, what I've done is, with my sitting figure, is I've tried to focus on the solidity of the arms and the legs because they're kind of working in the background here. But if I kind of use my X-ray vision and try to look beyond the arms and think about this torso, let me just clarify what's going on here. Let me get my little gray out. Okay. So this torso, like this one, it's facing this way. So I'm going to think of this body as just kind of like a giant cereal box. This torso, rather. And I can do the same for the pelvis down here. When we're sitting down, the way it works is that the pelvis, this is our rib cage. Our spine comes down like this. Our pelvis sits like this. The pelvis is this box sort of shape. If we were standing straight, the legs would come out of the bottom like this. But when you're sitting, the legs curve up like this. And the legs come out of the front like this. So whenever, and this kind of flat plane here of the rump region gives us a nice flat stable ground that makes it comfortable for us to sit down for long periods of time like this thinker is here. So I just kind of want to show the kind of structure that I'm building on top of with these arms. Or rather, the structure of the torso and the pelvis that we're building the arms onto. So let me go ahead and switch to a darker color, working on top. And let me get my brush. So this pelvis, and we have, or this pelvis and this torso up here. I'm going to drop the opacity of those down a little bit and just kind of forget about them. Let me do a new layer and go over in a darker color. So this arm comes out from up here. It is another cylinder, another soup can or Coke can, and we're seeing the bottom of it. This upper arm, again, is curving around like this to form a cylinder. And the bottom would go about right there. But on top of it, overlapping it, is the other cylinder, which represents this lower forearm region. And it connects like this. So we're kind of thinking in terms of mannequins and mannequinizing the figure so we could pose it and think about these forms. So again, if we had a cross contour, a line going across this cylinder, it wouldn't go like this across it. It wouldn't go like this. It would wrap around it. If this person was wearing a t-shirt, for instance, the line of the t-shirt would kind of go like this before it drapes down. Or if it was the 80s, and they were wearing sweatbands, those would kind of curve around like this, rather than just kind of simply going on at a flat angle. That little bit of curve, that little bit of bend gives you a greater sense of three-dimensionality and makes it seem like these people are real. It gives them kind of this sense of life that's very useful in trying to get people to sympathize with what you're drawing. And I think of the hand as kind of a block almost. I didn't really draw the hand in the other ones. And with hands, it's just a box, but you can build on this box and kind of add in fingers, which fingers themselves are just like these little tubes, these little Coke cans, these little cylinders. And the thumb is a little weird, but the thumb basically comes out from the side like a little wedge, this little kind of triangle shape. And from there, it's just another set of these two kind of smaller cubes. And then you just kind of have these kind of sausage link fingers. And you can wrap these fingers behind the first one, and that makes it easier to draw. And then that just kind of hooks up back with the rest of these kind of soup cans. And they look a little kind of snowman-y at this point. And I apologize for the lack of draftsmanship, but these principles make sense. If you look at any art done by your favorite artists or any old masters, you see these concepts of thinking of these shapes as three-dimensional forms and building on top of them. So I'm going to go ahead and do this leg down here. This leg moves in, and it is another kind of cylinder shape. And it goes down to here. This one is another cylinder. If I think about the other side, it's kind of this dotted line. And it's this kind of tapered cylinder, where if we looked at this from another angle, it'd kind of be like this. And that's what we can do with these shapes. And we can do the same with this leg. I'm going to kind of go on top of it. And then the other one, it kind of wraps back around there. And then this forearm here, this one is kind of facing upward. So again, if we had the kind of like these like 80s sweatbands, this would be curving upward this way. And then I'm going to draw this line in. If you're ever having trouble or difficulty drawing a line, what helps me is to kind of put a point, put another point, and then connect the two. It's a lot easier, and it kind of gives your eye and your hand something to shoot for. And I know, especially with me, I'm not used to digital art, but it's much easier to make videos using digital. So I do that a lot more digitally because it kind of gives me a chance to make sure my lines are going in the right direction. Again, the neck kind of goes down here, and that's a cylinder. I'm going to get rid of that top plane because we have the head. And the head's tilting down a little bit. And I think we're going to see a little more of the top of the head. I'm going to get rid of that extra line. Just a kind of a that shape. And the head can kind of work like this. And then whenever we get to the point where we're going to draw the actual figure on top of it, these sort of lines here, like this is going to be the top, this is the top of the rib cage. What we can do is kind of connect the dots in a way, take this line here from the side of the neck over to this edge here and then down. And then through connecting those into this kind of straightened out curve, we can get the contours of the body. Okay, so this is our last figure. I'm going to pretend like the top of the head is kind of going away from me, and it looks kind of like this. So yeah, this top shape kind of goes up like this. And that's going to come down on the sides. I'm going to see maybe just a little bit of that bottom plane. And then it goes into the neck, which is in itself another cylinder, another little kind of bloated soup can. This one's just going to curve a little bit because it's coming at an angle. Like I said before, if we look at a side view of the human body, the rib cage, the top of it is this plane here. Let me draw the rest of it so you see what I'm talking about. Is this form here, and when the head kind of looks up this way, the rib cage kind of curves like this. So these sorts of curves are pretty normal. The rib cage isn't always straight up and down, standing at attention. And then this time I'm thinking of the body again as just kind of a cereal box. It's just a lot easier to think of it that way. Whenever we're thinking about how the body fits into forms in space. All right. And then that kind of moves into this pelvic shape that's right here. I'm going to kind of gesture this in loosely. It's pretty clear. This one's a lot clearer than that one was. So I can go a little quicker. But again, these cylinders, just these little soup cans. This one's going towards me slightly. And that means that the cross contours are going to go around this direction. And then this one is also kind of coming towards me slightly. And then let's do this. Boom. And then kind of the same thing over there. Here you'll kind of see the boxy shape I was talking about for the hand. And sometimes when you're just kind of trying to get something down and get a pose down, kind of treating it, all of the fingers as this one big mass is very helpful and economical, especially if you're strapped for time. You see someone who's in an interesting pose and you want to get something down fast. And then here we kind of get another set of these bloated cylinders. I'm just kind of going on top of them to make these lines a little clearer. So as you can see, it's really just a matter of kind of taking the initial gesture that we started with. Let me actually do this. Let me finish up the rest of these lines. So I just traced over the majority of the shapes of this figure here. Let me zoom out a little bit. I just wanted to show you what it looks like when you compare this with the original gesture we started with. Let me drop the opacity a little bit. So we just kind of started with this basic scribble almost. And I guess that's the real point of this lesson, is to show you that you can really take these basic gestural stick figures almost, and you can build on them to get something that's a lot more substantial and a lot more lifelike. And you can still see that energy um, in this pose. And that's the thing. You want to maintain the energy you had initially, these like very straight lines where you're just kind of thinking about the direction of these shapes, and make sure you're kind of carrying that through. And that's something to do definitely like on a last pass of a drawing, is kind of look at your initial sketch and kind of try to make sure that's in there. So you see like this line here, this gestural line, I tried to keep that here. And then some stuff changes, like this hand outstretched more. This one, the angle changed a little bit. And these changes are very natural in all the drawings you make. You can definitely see it here. This one definitely got a lot tighter and kind of makes more sense now. Like see, like we kind of pulled the arm in, and it makes a lot more sense in space. And that's really the point of all this, is to kind of take us from a place where we're just drawing these basic gestural stick figures and kind of working and building towards something more substantial. And that's the thing. It really just always kind of starts with these sorts of drawings. And these drawings are very valuable. It's just a matter of kind of noticing and being aware of the world around you and the way that the figures look, and trying to incorporate that and build on that into something more substantial. Um, so as you can see, we kind of worked from just this basic framework gesture system into something a little more kind of, this is like basically taking that mess and cleaning it up just a little bit to make sense out of it, and then kind of building more complex forms that we can then build on top of. And even like from this, you can very, very, very quickly go to something very like a character almost. Um, and as you learn anatomy, you learn how to attach these things. You learn that, oh, okay, there's a muscle that goes right here, and that muscle goes down, and it goes into the elbow, and then, or rather, goes down to the elbow, and it connects this way. And there's like, oh, this thing goes here, and learning how these parts go together. Or even like, you have clothing, and the way that this clothing wrinkles. And it curves on the body. But you won't get to that point until you can wrap your mind around the gesture of the body, and how to organize the gesture into something more substantial, like the forms you see here. I hope this was helpful, and I hope this kind of makes figure drawing a little less scary. And it is scary at first, but even if you can't get to this point where you're drawing, like three-dimensional forms, even just starting with stick figures like this is super helpful, and it gets you more interested in the body and trying to understand how to draw. That's the thing. It's any sort of drawing, anything that you put into learning and trying to get better at art is always helpful. There's no such thing in wasted time when it comes to drawing. We have unlimited potential. I hope you guys stay safe out there. I'll be back soon with another one of these tutorials. Have a great day.